Whence the Whisper Comes. Chapter 4. Coffee and Omen. I stepped out of the library, blinking against the noon light that had no business being so bright in a town like Eldermire. The wind carried the scent of rain that hadn't come yet, thick and metallic, like the breath before a storm. My stomach growled, sharp and insistent. I checked my watch. Noon, on the dot. Long morning, too many questions, not enough answers, and certainly not enough coffee. I spotted a diner across the street, the kind of place where the linoleum never quite shines and the waitresses know everybody's business. A hand-painted sign hung above the door, Mabel's Eats. It fluttered in the wind as though reconsidering its welcome. Inside, it smelled like scorched bacon grease and stale cigarette smoke. The kind of place that hadn't changed since the Truman administration, and didn't plan to. A waitress with a stiff bun and a name tag that read Nancy gave me a nod as I slid into a booth. I picked one near the back, instinctively turning my back to the door. Then I hesitated, switched sides. Call it paranoia, call it a hunch, either way, I'd learned the hard way that knowing who walked in after you was better than guessing. Nancy sidled over with a pad and a half smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What will be, hun?" "Black coffee, eggs, toast, and whatever passes for sausage in this town." She smirked faintly, scratching it down. "Coming right up." As she disappeared toward the kitchen, I let myself sink into the booth. The vinyl stuck slightly to my coat. I rolled my shoulders, pulled out my notepad, and jotted down a few stray thoughts from the library. The drawing of the creature, the attic fort, the snarling mask. I barely touched my toast when the bell above the diner door jingled. Two men walked in, mid-40s, both wearing jackets that tried too hard not to match. They moved like men used to being quiet. The taller one had a limp that he didn't try to hide. The shorter one wore a hat too low over his brow. They slid into the booth directly behind me. I kept eating. Nancy brought their coffee without asking. Locals then, or close enough to pass. They didn't speak at first, just the clink of mugs and the creak of seats as one of them adjusted. Then, quietly, one of them said, "Preparations are almost complete." A pause. The other stirred his coffee with slow, careful motions. "Few more nights," he said, "then it's ready." They went quiet again. No names, no details. Just the kind of half-conversations that carry more weight in what isn't said. I didn't move, barely breathed. The first man, gravel voice, just a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place, muttered, "He'll be where he's supposed to be. The girl was only the beginning." The other chuckled, low, dry. "They always are." Their mugs clinked, a quiet toast to something I didn't want to understand yet. The chairs scraped, footsteps moved past behind me, headed toward the door. I waited a beat, then another. Only when the bell above the door jingled again did I look up. Through the streaked glass of the diner window, I watched them cross the street, heads down, jackets stiff against the breeze. They didn't look back. I folded my napkin slowly, tucking it under the edge of my plate. The girl was only the beginning. Something told me that the tapestry they were weaving was large, and I was already tangled in it. I left a few bills on the table, enough to cover the meal in a generous silence. Nancy didn't even glance my way as I stepped out into the sun. The two men were half a block ahead, moving with purpose. Not rushed, but not lingering either. The kind of walk that knew where it was going. My car still sat across from the library, nestled beneath the shadow of that skeletal oak. I crossed the street with casual steps, heart thudding a rhythm my feet refused to echo. I slid behind the wheel and turned the key. The engine caught with a quiet purr and I eased into gear. They turned down Main and headed east, where the road cracked a little more and the houses grew fewer. I hung back. Eldermire wasn't built for tailing. Too few cars, too many staring windows. A wrong glance in the rear view and the whole town would know you were sniffing where you didn't belong. The men didn't speak again, just moved like they had all the time in the world, while I shadowed them from about a half a block back, pausing at stop signs I didn't need and pretending to check my mirror more than I should. They passed the edge of town where pavement gave way to gravel, and the trees pressed closer like eavesdroppers. I almost lost them when they turned suddenly down a narrow lane, little more than 2 ruts and a stubborn path through overgrowth. I let a few seconds pass before I followed, cutting my headlights and rolling slow. The lane wound like a scar through the woods. Low branches scraped the top of my car, whispering things I didn't care to translate. Finally, I saw their vehicle, an old Ford truck parked at an angle near a clearing. Beside it sat a shack. It wasn't abandoned, not exactly, just old, leaning, shingles missing, a single window covered in grime, and a door that looked like it hadn't been closed properly in decades. Smoke curled faintly from a tin chimney, barely visible in the light slipping between the trees. I killed the engine and rolled the car off the trail, tires crunching over leaves until it was swallowed by brush. Then I waited. The 2 men disappeared into the shack without knocking. No one came out. I checked my watch. 1:30. The forest pressed in around me, quiet and watchful. Somewhere far off, a crow called once, sharp and lonely. I settled in, lighting a cigarette with fingers that didn't quite shake. The wind shifted, and the smoke from the chimney curled toward me. So I sat. And I watched, and I waited for whatever would come next. 2:00. The woods held their breath. I hadn't seen anyone leave the shack. Not a shadow, not a sound. Just a low, steady curl of smoke from the chimney like a lie whispered to the trees. I stepped from the car, careful not to rustle the brush too loudly, and moved slow, boots crunching soft against the loam. The shack sat like a forgotten thought, slouched between trunks that leaned a little too close. Its one grime-smeared window watched the clearing like a lazy eye. I crept closer, keeping low, and slid along the wall until I reached the window's edge. The glass was fogged and streaked, but I managed to clear a small patch with my coat sleeve, careful not to leave prints. Inside it was dark. No movement, no flickering shadows, just the faint outline of the stove end. I leaned closer. There, hanging from inside the window frame, was a tiny effigy. Twigs and bones bound in the same crooked symmetry I'd seen swinging in the trees near the mutilated carcass. This one was smaller, but no less deliberate. It stared blankly out at the woods. At me. I pulled back, pulse rising. No one had left, I was sure of it. Which meant either they were still inside, or I was losing my edge. I circled to the front and tested the door handle. Locked. I crouched, slipping a thin pick from the small leather pouch I kept beneath my coat. Years of experience made short work of the latch. It clicked open with a reluctant sigh. The door creaked softly as I pushed it inward. The interior was sparse, a table, 2 chairs, an iron stove that popped and hissed softly, a small cooking pot sitting atop, steam curling lazily from the lip. The smell was herbal, pungent, not quite food. A threadbare rug covered most of the warped floorboards, and a single oil lamp sat unlit on a shelf. But no people. No voices. No sign of an exit. I closed the door behind me and let the silence settle. Something was wrong. More than wrong. It was impossible. I moved to the rug, knelt down, and peeled up one edge. Wooden planks worn smooth by time. A seam. A trap door. I pressed my ear against it. Faint sounds, muffled. A voice? Chanting? It was hard to tell, but it was there. Movement. Life. I reached for the latch. A creak from below. Voices. Panic flickered in my chest, cold and sharp. I dropped the rug back into place, slipped toward the door, and eased it open just enough to slide through, pulling it silently shut behind me. Then I ran. No time to be delicate now. I dove into the nearest patch of brush, branches snagging my coat and dead leaves clung to my knees as I hunkered down, heart hammering. The door to the shack groaned open. 1, 2, 3. They kept coming, 7 in total. They filed out silently, faces blank, feet practiced. All wore heavy coats or dark cloaks, their movements slow but purposeful, like sleepwalkers or soldiers. The last to exit was the man with the limp. He paused on the threshold, glancing back into the shack like someone double-checking a trap. Then his head turned, eyes scanning the woods, then stopped, right on me. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I pressed into the dirt like the roots might swallow me whole. Seconds passed. The others had already moved on, disappearing down the path toward town, or forest, I couldn't tell which. The man's gaze stayed locked on my hiding spot. Then, a flurry of wings burst from a bush just a few feet to my left. A gray-feathered bird shot into the air with a shriek, startled into flight. The limp man flinched, eyes following it. Then he shook his head, muttering something I couldn't hear, and turned away. I watched him go, every muscle in my body wound tight as a piano wire. When I was sure I was alone again, I let out the breath I'd been holding. They'd come from beneath the shack. And if what I heard through that floor was what I feared, then whatever lay beneath that trap door wasn't just hidden, it was sacred. I crept from the bush and returned to the shack. The door let out a tired groan as I slipped inside again, closing it gently behind me. The pot still simmered. The trapdoor waited. I peeled back the rug, fingers slow and deliberate, listening for the faintest sound. Nothing. I opened the door and descended. The ladder creaked beneath my weight, each rung slick with time and cold air. The stink of wet stone and rust rose to meet me. A few steps later, and I hit dirt, hard-packed, stale. A tunnel stretched ahead, narrow, low, and ribbed with old timber supports long since blackened with age. A mine shaft, abandoned if the state of things could be believed. Except it wasn't. At the far end of the tunnel, light flickered. Candlelight. I moved slowly, careful not to let my boots scrape too loud against the stone. As I made my way forward, I passed intersecting shafts, most boarded over with warped planks and rusted nails. A few had slats missing, gaps wide enough to reveal only darkness beyond. One had claw marks gouged deep into the frame. I didn't stop to wonder what made them. The light grew brighter when I stepped into the cavern. It opened wide, the ceiling lost in shadow above. Stalactites hung like fangs over a chamber aglow with hundreds of candles. Their flames danced gently, casting trembling light over every crooked surface. The air was thick with incense and old, earthy decay. At the far end stood an altar, carved from black obsidian stone, polished and cold. Atop it lay a body, twisted, broken, limbs askew like a discarded doll. The flesh was flayed in patterns, symbols maybe, or just cruelty. But again, no blood, not a drop. The walls were worse. Paintings, crude and ancient, scrawled in soot and ochre, covered every inch of the stone. Some were fresh, brushstrokes still visible in the candlelight, but others were far older, the lines faded into the rock, almost fossilized. And yet they all shared the same theme, the same form, that thing. Jagged limbs, curled and coiled, horns or antlers or spines, eyes too many and mouths that stretched too wide. The same figure from the attic drawing, the same shape from the center of the crayon circle. Only now it loomed tall, revered, worshipped. I reached out, touched one of the older drawings, the pigment flanked underneath my fingers. Who painted this and when? A sound, voices, echoed from deeper down the shaft. I spun on instinct, ducking into a nearby tunnel and pressing my back against the cold rock. They came into view a moment later. Robes, faces in shadow, footsteps quiet but sure. I counted them as they passed, 11, 12, 13. Eyes forward, heads bowed, they moved like pilgrims returning to the site of a revelation. Then a face I recognized. One of the deputies, the older one from the woods, the smirkless one. My pulse spiked, so the law was in on it, or at least some part of it. The moment they passed, I moved, fast Quiet, I retraced my steps up the shaft, climbed the ladder, and pulled the trapdoor shut behind me. The shack felt colder now, smaller, less like a hiding place and more like a coffin. I bolted for the car and started the engine with shaking hands. The tires kicked up gravel as I pulled away from the clearing and back toward the road. I didn't stop until I was 5 miles outside of Eldermire, the trees thinning, the horizon opening. I pulled off to the shoulder. The engine idled. My hands still sat on the wheel. I could feel the blood pounding in my temples. There was a ritual chamber under the woods, corpses carved and drained, symbols no living language remembered, police involved, candles lit like worship, a beast drawn through generations, and Lily Caldwell was still out there. I stared at the stretch of road ahead, toward freedom, toward safety, toward nothing. Then I swore, loud and final, "Damn it!" I turned the wheel, and I drove back toward Eldermire.
There's smoke in the pines and blood in the stone. Shadows hum lullabies to men who die alone. Candles burn memories on walls carved in ash, and the things they remember are best left in the past. But the road don't forget you, and the woods never sleep. There's a price for the questions and the secrets you keep. When the black robe is waiting and the white one is torn, the whisper you follow was waiting since before you were born. The earth keeps its hunger, the stone keeps its name, the forest keeps echoes of faces without shame. Silence is patient, darkness is kind, until you go digging where daylight's gone blind. But the